Welcome to the Microdosing for Healing podcast. I'm your host, Casey Garrett, and together we'll be discovering and learning from inspiring voices of healers, medicine keepers, and visionaries. Every episode, we'll explore the world of health, vibrant wellness, and natural medicine for a new era of human society. Welcome to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microdosing for Healing podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so excited to introduce during this episode our theme that we're going to be working with over the next few months in our microdosing community. So one thing that is I think a foundational part of the practice is lightening the body in all the ways. So our theme is going to be light body. And that means detoxing the body, losing weight, sometimes losing physical weight, losing density. You know, over time and again, we see in our programs, over time, weeks and months pass, and participants become lighter, brighter, more radiant. They start to glow, they lose weight. And there's something to that. It's the things we're doing, but it's also the things we're taking away and the things we're releasing. So I'm so delighted to have my friend and colleague, Karen Bush of Full Capacity Living with us today. She is a functional medicine coach, and she's going to help support our microdosing practices with all of her great wisdom, knowledge, and advice she has learned about these topics. So welcome, Karen, and thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for asking me to be here, Casey. I'm super excited.
Likewise. Excellent. For those of you who are meeting Karen for the first time, I would love to read a short bio of her background to give you a little bit of flavor of her. So Karen, like many of us, was in the traditional healthcare and healing fields for 25 years. And had a growing awareness that conventional healthcare often fell short in addressing the root causes of illness, and that led her to pursue additional training. She started off at Duke University's Integrative Medicine Health Coach program and continued at the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. Karen then honed her expertise at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, where she was among the first in the country to achieve National Board Certification for Health Coaching in 2017. Driven by a deep passion for empowering others to lead healthier lives, Karen launched her own private practice in functional medicine health coaching, collaborating with providers worldwide. When she's not helping clients, you'll likely find Karen on the waters of Cleveland's Cuyahoga River during rowing season, skillfully navigating around freighters in her rowing shell. Off the water, she enjoys hiking with her husband, Gary, and their sweet dog, Amika. Welcome, Karen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Let's start off with a hot topic right now, which is physical weight loss. You know, as I shared, it was about 6 months in our microdosing community. We tend to see each other from the neck up. And someone on a call once said, you know, did you lose weight? Does anybody else here lose weight? And literally everybody raised their hands. And it was like, wow, okay. I was often unintentional. So with all of the new weight loss pills and shots and Ozempic in the news and the synthetic form of weight loss, I would love to delve into physical weight loss. I have a hunch why we often see people lose weight while microdosing, but I would love to get your reflection on it and what you see in your functional medicine practice.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely a hot topic. I would agree. And I think there are a couple of different ways of thinking about weight loss, particularly. And we do sometimes in functional medicine find people coming to us with that as part of what they want to achieve. Our way of thinking about it is really to think about overall health. When you bring your overall health into alignment, then your body starts to be more balanced and it reaches a natural set point, right? And in functional medicine, similar to what you're talking about, there's a spiritual component. There is a component of the, letting go and shedding things. When people come into functional medicine, they often end up towards the end, like leaving their job or changing their partner, or, just delving into things that they never thought they would before. And so from a weight loss perspective, we like to talk about it as overall health, right? How can we balance all of the different systems within our body, and mind, body, and spirit, to bring yourself into this balance, right? So I would say a couple things, right? The spiritual piece, the calming of the autonomic nervous system, that is a big piece of what we work on through tools and mindset shift and those sorts of things, but also nutrition actually can calm the autonomic nervous system too. So losing that excess, and I think secondly, we also work on things like sleep. And when you are sleeping better, your body doesn't produce as much of a hunger hormone called ghrelin. And so, probably similar to what your people are experiencing, they're shedding things, letting go. They can get into a deeper sleep. Their body is reaching this state of homeostasis. And so for us, that's really what we work on. There are some people in functional medicine who have definitely moved into the Ozempic realm, and not everybody's there. I think there is a certain population that is really ideal for that, but a lot of other people, not so much. I think it's very much overdone.
Yeah, one of the things I love to see is it's many people lose weight not as the goal, but as the consequence of coming into themselves. It's like as they come out and we're fully step into their soul, step into their dharma and their purpose, it's everything that's not them tends to go to release. And so physical weight too and density can be a big part of that. So
absolutely. I mean, when you start to pay attention to certain things around your health and your spiritual health, and then you can't not pay attention to the other things. I mean, they're knocking on your back door. You may not want to open it, but they're knocking there saying, "Hey, can you pay attention to me too?"
Yeah. Exactly. One thing I would love to get your perspective on is intermittent fasting. It's something that I have experimented with. I've heard lots of opinions about it. For people who have never heard that term before, can you explain to people what it is and why one would attempt it?
Mm-hmm. So intermittent fasting, there's two ways of thinking about it. Some people talk about time restricted eating. Other people talk about intermittent fasting. They're kind of two different things. And it runs the gamut in terms of what people do. At the basic level, intermittent fasting is allowing your body time where it's not working to digest food, right? And for the basic person, like you could do that 12 hours, right? That would literally be, let's stop eating after like 7, after I've had dinner, if you have dinner early enough, right? But even if you eat at 8, right? Stop eating by 8 and don't eat until 8 the next morning. And it allows your gut to work on some healing. It sort of supports cell turnover. There's a lot of really good benefits to intermittent fasting. Now, sometimes people can use it for weight loss, but it isn't always used for that. It's really more of a gut healing protocol. And so you want to, that cell regeneration, cell turnover of old cells, new cells growing. Time restricted eating often can be, people sometimes just have a 4-hour window that they eat in, and then they don't eat the rest of the time. And sometimes that can work for people, sometimes not. What I do know about it is that it can be a really powerful tool, yet you have to be in the right place for it, right? If you're in a state of fight or flight and your stress levels are really high, you have high cortisol levels, you're running, going. Sometimes intermittent fasting is really not the thing that your body needs. It's giving yourself a signal that, ooh, I don't know when food's going to come, so I'm not ready for it. And if you're already in this place of fight or flight, you don't necessarily want to be doing it then. So I think it's important to think about when we use that as a tool and when we don't use it as a tool. nourishment and good nourishment is a signal to your body that it's safe, right? And if you're not feeling safe the rest of the time, meaning, you've got high cortisol levels and there's some stress or trauma in your life, it's probably not the right time. But it can be a really helpful tool.
That's beautiful advice to differentiate how much is going on in your life. Very similar to microdosing. We ask those questions when people are starting. It's when they're talking about, should I microdose or should I do a high dose journey? It's taking sense of your safety in your environment, how much is going on in your life, what is your stress level like, will help determine where you should start. So it's very similar. I know I've tried intermittent fasting and I found that I really love to eat too much to do the extreme. But I did find it, when I did sometimes like a 10 a.m., I'd eat between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. And I would make sure and to give your body, I did notice a difference, especially in those morning hours. To give your body time for your energy doesn't have to go into digestion. So it can go into healing and recovery and repair. So I did experience that, especially in the morning hours of intermittent fasting.
Yeah. And I think the other caveat in addition to that is that oftentimes in functional medicine, we'll talk to people about not drinking any caffeine for the first 90 minutes of the morning, so that you can allow your natural cortisol levels to come up and you're not masking it with artificial energy. And, people freak out a bit about that. They're like, wait, I got to put my pot of coffee on in the morning. But you realize that you actually don't need that. And we've kind of bypassed our own cortisol levels that are most high in the morning. The cortisol isn't always a bad thing, right? It's part of our circadian rhythm and we do need it. So that's another piece of the puzzle, because I know probably with some of your folks with microdosing, it's best to do it on an empty stomach and without some of those things. And so it's like a perfect combo, some of the things that we talk about in functional medicine.
I love it. I can see people already going, oh, I can't have coffee 90 minutes. But let me share one of the practices we did in one of our groups recently was we really dedicated ourselves to getting morning sunlight, getting first rays within an hour of waking. And so one way to make sure that we got outside and got our rays was to say, I can't have my coffee until I've done that.
Perfect. Yeah.
So these little rituals that we can, create these habits in our lives to get us what we need.
Well, first morning light is setting your circadian rhythm so you have good sleep. And if you do that in a natural way, and, I live in Ohio, full disclosure, right? It's dark as the year goes on. And so I use what I call a happy light in the morning, because I get up early and sometimes there isn't a lot of light. You can still go outside, but that's a beautiful practice. I love that you did that and you kind of brought it into your group.
It's a game changer, especially for people who were having sleep disruption, had a hard time falling asleep, had a hard time staying asleep. You really, really notice and can change up your sleeping pattern if you get those morning rays. Absolutely. Let me ask you about another, very simple, but very, very vitally important topic, which is our hydration. I've witnessed in our programs this year, a lot of people having pretty profound spiritual expansion and opening. And it's been interesting. They seem to require more water when you're going through this accelerated growth periods of time. So can you talk about, we hear drink 8 glasses of water a day. Is that true? Is it false? Like, how do you advise your clients when you're talking about hydration?
Right. I want the silver bullet of hydration, right? It's different for everyone, to be honest with you. I mean, there's a general sort of rule of thumb that says half your body weight in ounces. Yet for some people, that's not enough if you're really active. And for some people, it's a little too much, right? So we all have different levels of, our body's ability to kind of absorb that water. And sometimes people can drink a lot of water and they just end up going to the bathroom every 20 minutes. And so your body is flushing all of that out. And you can become hyponatremic, which means that you're flushing out all your potassium, sodium, and magnesium, your essential minerals. So, good rule of thumb, half your body weight in ounces. Yet I would also say, kind of look at yourself personally and how do you respond to that? And you might want to add some electrolytes to that, because electrolytes will allow that hydration to get into your body at a cellular level. And that's really where we need it, right? We want to hold on to it. We don't want to just pee it all out, right? So there, I think those two things. And when you're using your brain and your body a little bit more, it goes through those vital nutrients. You even probably feel more hungry when you're spending a lot of intense emotional time, because your body uses up all those nutrients. So little electrolytes can be helpful. Sometimes when people either feel tired in the afternoon or they're feeling hungry, I'll say, have something to drink, because maybe you're thirsty. You might be dehydrated.
Beautiful. I could talk to Karen all day about this next topic. One of her areas that she's most well versed in is detoxification and, releasing spiritually, releasing physically, releasing toxins, environmental toxins. So one of the things that comes up in microdosing practice often in the first few weeks is people go, I'm just doing this to feel better. And I just kind of feel like I had this weird flu. I feel sluggish. I feel heavy. I'm crying a lot. And so I love for Karen to talk about this from a functional medicine perspective. Like, what is actually going on? What do we call this and term this? And how long does it typically last is a very, very popular question.
Yeah. So same thing with functional medicine. When we start working on changing nutrition and changing the gut microbiome, which I'm super excited about the research that's coming out now about the gut microbiome and psychedelics, all different types, psilocybin, MDMA. It's nascent, right? Like that information is really nascent, but I think we do know that it changes the bacterial level in the gut. And oftentimes when that happens from our perspective, when we're changing even just food or pulling out some of the things that might be inflammatory and adding things in that are a better diversity for your bacteria, you can feel like you have the flu, right? And so it's because your body is going through what we call die-off, right? You're no longer feeding the bacteria that are what we would potentially call non-commensal bacteria, the ones that we don't really need, but they live in our gut sometimes in larger amounts than we want them to. So when you no longer feed them, they start to leave and they aren't happy. They kind of liked that little cozy place that you created for them in the gut and you were feeding them, and now they're mad. So it does create die-off, and it creates something that feels like the flu. And it usually lasts, and it's dependent on each person again, right? Like if you're eating Cheetos and beer, you're probably going to have a little bit longer of a die-off period than most people, right? But a week or two is probably max. And so people start to feel like, I want to stop this. I don't feel really good. Yet what we know about that is if you have the knowledge, and this is what we tell people up front, that this is part of the healing, that if you look at those symptoms of feeling like, fluish and not your best, maybe your gut's just a little upset. You think about those symptoms as being part of the healing, you will do so much better, right? And I think we talked about this study out of Stanford where they were trying to introduce very tiny amounts of peanuts to kids who had peanut allergies, which I know sounds crazy, like, oh my gosh, I got to stay away from peanuts. But this was because they realized that we've kept things from certain people, and then you can develop an intolerance to them. Maybe it's not so much of an allergy, but an intolerance. And so the children that they talked about, the flu-like feelings, or just feeling not great, or the symptoms that you're going to feel, are part of the healing, and that means you're getting better, actually came out feeling like they had less of those symptoms and they recovered more quickly. So, mindset is a really big piece of the puzzle in functional medicine, which I feel, that's a big part of the practice that I have, helping people shift their mindset. And that's one of the very obvious ways that you can do it. So, and the other way that you can kind of work through that is being kind to yourself, right? Being kind and gentle, and allowing yourself to feel those emotions and let them come out, and allow yourself to cry. We don't allow ourselves to do that enough. We're not gentle and compassionate with ourselves. We are to everybody else, but maybe not so much to ourselves. And when you start to feel that, okay, I've held this for way too long and I don't need to hold it anymore. I can let it go. The process of letting it go may not feel so great, but if I'm gentle with myself, I'll get through it. And on the other side will be glorious things.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. I would love to dive into that layer a little bit more deeply, because I know you and I both work with a lot of very high achieving folks, right? I love you listening. I know you're like, yes. And, they approach their health and their wellness and their spiritual growth the same way they approach life, which is, they go after it. They're very dedicated and devoted. But a lot of times the healing effect and their healing is the opposite of what they expect. It's telling them to take naps and go to bed early, or it's making them cry more, right? Or it's making them, eat differently, or not drink alcohol so they can't socialize and go to the business, the business dinners, the business meetings the way they used to. And so a lot of times it's very frustrating, and they get impatient and too hard on themselves in the process. So can you talk a little bit about how we actually heal, and how the approach to functional medicine is so different than our conditioned way of instantaneous results, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, people often seek out functional medicine with a baseline knowing and understanding that this is a different way of approaching my overall health, right? Yet I've also had people who have that basic understanding get a little panicked when I start talking about maybe you need to step back a little bit from the intensity of your exercise, or you need to allow yourself a little more time during the day. Can you take 10 minutes at the end of a meeting and cut it short so that you have time for yourself? You could do a little breath practice. You could let go of whatever the meeting gave to you and move to the next thing. There's a lot of pushback. And I can understand that, because they've gotten where they are in life using all of those skills. And to them, it's a foreign thing to think about, oh, but I can't let go of that intensity. Like that's not going to work for me. I think I mentioned to you, and rowing always comes up. So if there's any rowers out in the audience, I'm happy to chat with you. But when I worked at the Center for Functional Medicine, the Cleveland Clinic, I created a mindfulness course, and I was teaching it, and I was talking about rowing because it always comes up. It's just a big part of me. And this one person that was in the course was like, wait a minute, you're a competitive rower and you meditate? That doesn't seem like it goes together. And I said, oh, let me tell you how it definitely goes together, right? So it's like holding those two things. You think you have to be super intense about even getting into your health. It's just the way you've always done things. I'm a type A personality. I like to sort of help people to let go of some of those preconceived notions of who they are, and understand that if you do something differently, it doesn't mean that you're not going to still be successful. And it's really uncomfortable to sit in that place of feeling like, oh, I'm letting go. I'm, stepping back from that intensity, and I'm still going to achieve something. It's really uncomfortable. And you have to sit in that uncomfortable place. I've had to do it. I still have to make myself do it. And that's a big part of the work that I do with people. It's not just checking the boxes of doing all the things, right? I'm doing red lights, I'm doing infrared sauna, red light therapy. I'm going to my therapist. I'm going to yoga. And I'm still, I'm not losing weight and I don't feel any better because you're doing too much, right? You stepping back and allowing yourself that time to shift your mindset into a place of, if I give myself a little time and I really can feel from a somatic perspective how my body is relaxing, these things are going to work better for me.
So beautifully said. What you just described, I hear so often in reflection of the leaders that I work with. Mm-hmm. People in leadership positions after 6 months or a year of working with the medicines, they're like, they did worry. They're like, I'm worried I'm going to lose my edge. I'm just going to be chilled out all the time and lose my edge. And actually the opposite, they're more focused. They're more discerning. They're more clear. And they're like, I'm actually a better leader from this lean back, step back position, because the more intense you are, the more focused you are, sometimes your perspective is narrower. And from this calm place, they're like, I can see the whole field now.
Totally. And, from a neurological perspective, when you're intense like that, you're going from your amygdala, right? You're going from an emotional place. You're not going from that prefrontal cortex, which is your place of, I can step back, create some white space, and make a good decision with all the elements in front of me, right? That's what you get from allowing yourself to slow down.
Beautiful.
Hard.
Oh, yes, it is hard. Yeah. My next question, I would love for people who are intent upon, releasing fear, releasing density, working to create more space and more light in the body. Are there anything you've seen in terms of foods or supplements or vitamins that are especially great to introduce and bring into your world? And are there some things that are good to let go from your world?
Yeah, definitely. So the nutritional piece, let's start there, because that is, it's low-hanging fruit, right? For most people, it's something that we do at least 2 to 3 times a day. We make the choice about it often throughout the day. So it's the place to start where you can get a toehold and feel like you're actually doing something. So oftentimes letting go of what we would consider some higher inflammatory foods and things, those things would include things like gluten, sometimes for people, dairy, sugar. That's definitely a big high inflammatory food. We do have kind of a list, but again, we do it from a personal perspective. If someone says, all I can do is stop eating bread or toast in the morning. I have somebody now who had 6 pieces of toast in the morning and a cup of tea. And she said, I know I can't do that anymore. I said, it's okay. Like, I'm not telling you that bread is bad. I'm just saying you might want to step back from it a little bit and see how it makes you feel, right? You're N of 1. You can do this experiment with yourself. So gluten, dairy, sugar, sometimes corn, which is like an additive to lots of things, but processed foods in general, right? If you step away from things that are in a box or in a package and you eat whole foods, clean foods, you're going to be ahead of the game right there, right? So if you don't have to read the ingredient list because there isn't one, then you're going to be cutting down on inflammatory foods to begin with. Looking at your plate as like the colors of the rainbow, right? Thinking about how many colors. Most of us get in this narrow pathway of, I eat the same thing for breakfast. I know I can get this at the grocery store for lunch. And these are my 5 dinners that I make. Which is great, right? But could you rotate that maybe every couple of weeks? and think about diversity, because that's the best thing for your gut. And when we talked about that bacteria, what we want is diversity. Like the bacteria and the fungus in our gut are good. They're not bad. And we're more bacteria in our bodies than we are anything else. So, but you just want diversity. It's just like anything. Any society that has diversity is a stronger society. So when you just go to the grocery store and get dark leafy greens in the package, maybe you think about, could I add in some arugula? What about radicchio? What about, dandelion greens, or some of the other things that we don't always think about? So go to your grocery store and think a little more diversity. What else could I get in my cart that's different? And then all different colors, right? And the other thing I think people don't think about are things like sauerkraut and kimchi and some of the probiotic foods. Those things can be really, really helpful. You don't probably need more than a tablespoon or two of a good sauerkraut, and that's going to bring some good diversity into your gut. And you asked about supplements, which is another thing that people like to think about a lot. So there's a baseline of things I think that most people need to pay attention to from a supplement perspective. I wish I could tell you that we could get everything from our food and the things that we expose ourselves in the day to, but we really can't. Our soils are depleted. Our foods don't have the nutrient density that they used to. By the time you get some of your fruits and vegetables, they've been sort of on the truck for a while. And unless you've got a lovely garden outside and you're cutting it right away, it loses a little bit. So, first of all, checking vitamin D levels, making sure that you have good levels of vitamin D. That is a really important hormone in our body. So vitamin D3 with K2 is an important supplement, but I would make sure that you talk to your doctor and do some labs first. A good omega-3, because we, again, don't get enough from the foods we eat, even if we do eat a lot of the smaller little fish or salmon that give us the good omega-3s. I think the other piece of it is a good probiotic. Now, probiotics, we could do a whole podcast, right? And I'm probably not the person to do the podcast, right? But there are some really good probiotics out there if you get kind of a general one. And that's one of the things I think they're doing some research on, bifidobacteria and the efficacy of that and some of the psychedelics and how it supports your body utilizing that in a better way and having a better outcome. So, there's a lot of different probiotics out there, but I can give a 15% discount for supplements if people want. You can ask me about that later if you want. But so I would say vitamin D, a good omega-3, probiotic, and magnesium. Magnesium is another thing that I think that most people aren't really, we don't have enough of. Again, you can test it. You can see what your magnesium levels are. But magnesium glycinate, helpful for sleep, helpful for relaxation. So I think those would be my top supplements. If you're looking to bring some more calm into your life, Tulsi tea in the afternoon can be a really lovely thing to do as well. So I think those are probably some good, nutrition and supplement things to think about.
That is excellent advice. And how often, I've been surprised in talking to array of people, how many bowel movements should people be having a day?
Good question. We talk about bowel movements all the time. I always preface it by saying, listen, I'm not embarrassed. I hope you're not. We have to talk about this. It's the best way to see how healthy your body is.
Absolutely.
1 to 2 long, skinny snakes should be something that, and again, this is like, for some people, it'll be too much information, but when you wipe, you shouldn't really have much. It should be coming out like cleanly. And again, magnesium glycinate can definitely help with that. If you take, some of that at night or, during the day, it is a smooth muscle relaxant. So it is best to take it at night. let it do its magic overnight. And so, yeah, 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. You know, you don't want to go too much. You don't want to go too little. Once a week is definitely not a good idea, because going back to the detoxification piece, that's how our bodies detoxify, through bowel movements, through sweat, through urine, through crying. That's how we know our bodies are getting rid of the things that we don't need. So yeah, definitely 1 to 2 times a day.
Thank you so much. It's so important. And also, too, I oftentimes have people when they start a microdosing practice, I'm like, think of mushrooms in nature. Think of what mushrooms do to nature, to do to fallen trees. That's what they're doing to us. And it's our job to support the process, right? And so if they are remediating and bringing all these toxins and all of these old traumas and imprints through our body to excrete, we can help support the process with our diet and
Right, right.
yeah, providing these vehicles of catharsis. So
Yeah, I mean, I think this connection between psychedelics, microdosing, however you're using them, and functional medicine is so powerful, right? Like, you're just getting the most that you can get from both of these practices if you combine them. You know, you can't ignore what you're putting into your body or what you're exposing your body to when you're trying to work through a lot of this emotional, as you say, you know, clearing out, letting go.
you touched on this a little bit earlier, and it's one of the things I love about your approach so much is the fact that, you know, people who tend to come to microdosing, people who tend to come to functional medicine are being very proactive. You
Mhm.
know, they're leading their lives and empowering their lives, but you can do all the microdosing in the world. You can do all, you know, optimizing your health. But if you're putting yourself back into a relationship that's unhealthy or a work environment that's very toxic,
Mhm.
it's yeah, you and so you talked about that a lot of people end up making these significant changes once they make these internal shifts. So can you talk a little bit about that? So people, I think it's really helpful to have that awareness as you're going into the practice. So
Right.
I'd love for you to offer some guidance around that.
Right. I think, you know, it doesn't all have to happen at once. But I think once you open that door, as I said, you can't not pay attention to it. And, you know, true, as you said, you can do all the things, you can eat the best food, you can take all the supplements, you know, but if you are out of alignment with something that is a value of yours, whether it's a relationship that isn't the right person for you, or maybe it's an abusive relationship, or it's someone who just drains the energy away from you and you're not able to reciprocate that, um, that, you know, at some point you have to pay attention to it. And in our coaching, you know, it's about just asking the right questions and help, you know, maybe asking someone, so is there any sense of feeling like you're out of alignment anywhere? Right. And I'm not going to tell someone what might be out of alignment. They already know. Right. And if you ask the question or kind of get in there and get them to think about it a little bit more, they'll come to that realization and then they have to make the choice. Right. Is this where I want to be? And again, that's that uncomfortable place, right? I'm uncomfortable with being uncomfortable because I don't know what's coming around the next corner. If I leave my job that I hate, that's sucking the energy from me. And, you know, I don't even have 2 minutes to like take lunch or go outside or see the sun. And I'm just constantly working. It's really hard, but I think, you know, the process of changing other things along the way becomes the process of getting into alignment. And so it happens. It happens without, sometimes without even bringing it up. People will go, yep, this is what I need to do. I realize this. It's like a
Mhm.
download.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we've seen that too. I mean, people deciding to move across the country, people leaving a relationship, people quitting the job that they've known has been out of alignment for years, but it's that thing that kind of pushes them over. And it's, yep, their spirit saying, not
Yeah.
another day. Yeah.
Well, and I think you kind of brought it up before. It's like maybe people who are in a job where they've decided maybe through this practice or through functional medicine they're going to step back from alcohol for a little while, and then they have to think about their work situation, and that sometimes involves alcohol and socialization, and maybe they're in sales, maybe they're in a management position, and they feel that that's a necessity. And so that's really hard, right? It's like, okay, now I'm shifting this. Maybe I still have my work, but I know my work involves a lot of these things that I'm not feeling so cool about anymore. I mean, the sober movement is so popular now, and there's so many alternatives. And I almost feel like, and maybe it's because I'm looking at it so much, I feel like it's almost like the thing to do now, right? Like it's not as unusual for people to say, I'm not drinking tonight. I'm going to just, I'm not going to have that glass of wine because I really feel better when I don't, right? That's another piece of it.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's something I've noticed a huge shift in. So, 4 or 5 years ago in our programs, it was, everybody was locked down and a lot of people came to practice because one of their intentions was they're like, I was leaning on the wine a little bit too much during lockdown. And their intention is to lessen their drinking, but a lot of them just stopped drinking altogether, and it was effortless, and they noticed how much better they felt physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so much lighter. But they had a really hard time when everything opened up again, and they
Yeah.
were like, oh my gosh, it's so strange dating and not drinking, socializing with my friends and not drinking. And they almost had to come up with excuses. Like they were like, oh, well, I'm microdosing, I can't, or I'm cleansing and I can't drink, rather than just saying I don't drink. And I've noticed a huge shift just even in 4 to 5 years that it's perfectly acceptable to say, I just feel better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that because I do feel like there's always that pressure, and I think particularly for women in women groups, wine o'clock, or I need a little glass of wine. There's all these memes and jokes around it, and I don't if somebody wants to have a glass of wine or something, it's not a problem. But I do realize that, and some people will think that my sleep is better when I have a glass of wine, when they realize not having it actually, we know that isn't the case, right? Your body's detoxing it, and that's why you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and can't get back to sleep. So it is a beautiful movement, and that it's more accepted, and there's more ways to do it that are acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things I have received the guidance on frequently from my guide is in terms of your spiritual development. I mean, your body, your mental health are definitely impacted too. But for people who are really wanting to develop themselves spiritually, she frequently says to me, living foods diet. Eat living foods with a living vibration that are not far from the earth and have energy. That
Mhm.
is the point. That's how the human body was designed, to assimilate this energy from the planet. And so I'd love to focus on food because it's so simple, but again, it's a thing in terms of our overall health we don't focus on enough. Like we're always wanting to add pills and vitamins and supplements rather than the food itself. So, can you share some of your favorite go-tos in
Oh,
terms of like when you're at the market, like what are your favorite go-to foods and what are some of the foods that we tend to consume that we would be best off letting go of?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So when I'm at the market, for me, I spend a lot of time in the produce section.
Shocker.
Yes, shock, shock. And, there's so many things that I think people overlook and don't pay attention to. Things like jicama, or jicama is like a really good little crunchy snack that we don't even think about using, or kohlrabi, right? Some of these things that we know, certainly they're found easily in most grocery stores, and people don't even know what they are. Sometimes I'll bring them to the cashier, and it'll be somebody young, and they'll be like, "Oh, what is this?" Well, that's kohlrabi. And how do you use it? Oh, you can just slice it raw and eat it with a little bit of hummus, and it's wonderful. It's like a chip. So I would say, staying in the produce section, and then bitter greens, I think, are a thing that people overlook often. And those, it depends on somebody's taste buds too. If you're really a super taster, sometimes they are too strong for you. But you can add just a little bit into a salad or a soup or something like that and still get the benefit of it. And adding the greens right at the end, so that if it's a soup, it's not going to be, cooked out. But the bitter greens, things like dandelion greens, and as I mentioned before, radicchio, endive, arugula, dandelion greens, I think, at least in my area, and I'm in Ohio, so I'm not in like a major metropolitan city. I can get dandelion greens. I can get broccoli sprouts, some of the sprouted foods that are really phytonutrient dense, sprouted seeds and sprouted like lentils and beans. Those things are really easy you could do them yourself if you wanted to, but you can also find them other places. So a lot in the produce section, adding more of those things to your plate, making sure that you're getting things that are seasonal, right? Do you have a local farmer that you could go to? Is there somebody that is, and for us, I think in Ohio, it's hard too, because seasonal things, we don't get the greens. I'm not saying that you can't have that. That's certainly not the case, right? But maybe there's freezing and canning, and even some frozen things they freeze them right at the point of picking them. So usually frozen things have a little bit higher nutrient content. So it's not a bad idea to do that. Things like onions and the alliums, the garlic, all of those things are really great for your gut. So don't forget to add those things in. The other idea around salads and greens is that you need a little bit of like an olive oil, because there are fat soluble nutrients in them that your gut's not going to absorb if you don't have a little bit of that oil. So the whole fat-free thing, I think, let's put that aside, right? You don't need to overdo fats, but you definitely need a few good fats: avocados, hemp seeds, nuts and seeds. Those are really good fat sources that you can do. Even some of the smaller fish, right? If you like to eat fish, rediscover sardines and anchovies. Those things have great omega-3s, and they don't have as much of the high mercury content as the bigger fish. So that's, I think, a lot of the things that we can kind of bring into our lives, and the things that we should sort of let go of, right? Processed foods, quick foods. Take the time to really pay attention to your food. I know people have busy lives, but again, if you're kind of going through the drive-through all the time because you've got to get your kids to soccer practice and this and that, maybe you take a Saturday or a Sunday and you take, a couple hours in the morning, and you get your kids to help you, and you prep some things, and then you can make a quick meal that's actually nutrient dense, right? So letting go of some of those prepackaged things and quick things. I will tell you that there are good places to eat if you need something quick, right? But you don't want to rely on that all the time. So as we talked about, letting go of some of the inflammatory foods, inflammatory seed oils, maybe you want to stick with avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil. The unfiltered extra virgin olive oil is probably your best bet. Coconut oil, if you can tolerate that. That's sometimes a little too strong for some people. But again, a little bit of that balance between good fats, good protein, good healthy carbohydrates, right? Carbohydrates are not bad. You want to think about maybe, you eat them at the end of your meal versus the beginning of your meal, but maybe you eat a sweet potato, maybe you eat, cauliflower. Those are still carbohydrates, but they're a good quality carbohydrate. So hopefully that's kind of answered.
That's so fun. Yes, I love it. I love it. And I love your emphasis on diversity. I am one of those people that definitely has my favorites and gets and ruts. And those of you who have access to CSA boxes, I know one of the gifts of community supported agriculture.
Right.
Most places in the US that have some farmland, you can pay oftentimes a subscription to get fresh.
Mhm.
They choose whatever's in harvest, and we're coming to harvest season soon for many crops. And one of the advantages of CSA is I remember when I first started years ago, I would open the box and I'm like, I don't recognize any of this stuff.
Right.
I don't even know how to begin to eat some of this stuff. Totally, totally. And I'm like, do I cut this? Do I just bite it? But it was it made you feel so good,
Right.
and really, really supportive of your digestion to have a mixture of produce. So that's great, great
Good.
advice.
Yeah. And that you can find new recipes for things, right? I remember when I first got in my CSA Jerusalem artichokes, I was like, oh, I've seen these. I'm not really sure what I should do with these. But yeah, it's so great to have like new and different things to think about and create. And the meals don't have to be extravagant. They could be simple, right? And close to the earth is really important, right? I think I remember when I first started reading about the gut microbiome, Dr. Robin Chutkan, who's a GI physician trained at Georgetown, but sort of in the integrative world now, her motto was eat clean, live dirty, right? Like
Love it.
food, but get out and get dirty, get in the dirt, walk in the ground without your shoes on. Um, you know, I love that. I think that's a great motto to think about living. And then, yeah, like you said, diversity, eating the rainbow, looking at your plate and going, oh, do I have enough color in my plate? Does it all look like brown? Probably not a good idea. Not the most nutrient dense.
Right, right. Oh, beautiful. Well, in closing, when I have my medicine guests with me, I love to close by inviting them to offer their vision. Imagine no restrictions and what they're seeing, and kind of the little threads come out, what they see the future looking like. So I would love to ask you a similar question based on, you've been at this quite a while now, based on what you're kind of seeing in your clients and where things are going. Can you share a little bit about kind of your hope and vision for a healthier future and how you see that kind of taking shape?
Wow, that's a really good, insightful question. And I mean, there's several things that I do hope that we're on the path toward slowing down a little bit more, and realizing that we don't have to. That I think the idea that we can have it all is really been detrimental to a lot of people. Because maybe you can, but each thing is going to be such a sliver of what it could be, right? It's just this holistic way of thinking about slowing down, connecting with nature more. But I think I shared with you that, when I think about the goal for me with the work that I do for people, and again, it may sound grandiose, but I think it's ultimately world peace, right? Because when people feel better and they're not stressed out and they're nourishing their bodies, they're kinder to people. They're more connected to the world as a whole rather than, thinking of themselves as just an individual. We're connected to people, we're thinking about others. we're just kinder and gentler and more compassionate. And I do think that when you feel better and when your body is healthy and your mind and spirit are in alignment, it's a better world. It's a more peaceful world. So that's what I really hope happens with, the future of this way of thinking around our health and well-being.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Where can folks find you?
They can find me at KarenBush.com. Very simple. I realized that I did a search a couple weeks ago, and there's another Karen Bush out there who's a health and wellness coach, but mine is KarenBush.com. Nothing else besides that. And I usually do like a complimentary discovery call if people want to kind of understand what I do and whether we're a good fit to work together. And they can schedule that on my website.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much. I really appreciate you and your approach and full capacity living. Speaking of visions, it's one of the things I have seen profoundly shifting in people for the first time in my career is people are really open to experiencing the full capacity of their life. Healing and health for so long has been about fixing what's wrong and making tolerable what hurts, right? And I find people stepping into this fuller spectrum of what is possible for them. So full capacity living is where it's at. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. And I did want that domain name, although somebody has it, so I can't.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, that's a sort of a play on John Kabat-Zinn's monumental book, Full Catastrophe Living. So I kind of shifted it and made it, something that felt good to me around, just looking at everything, right? It is possible to have a life that feels full in every aspect. And that's not, I can have everything, but it's, it's feeling in alignment. Yeah. Thank you for having me. This has been a really fun conversation, and I love sharing all of this stuff, as you can tell.
Oh, we appreciate it very, very much. So thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, for listening today. We'll see you back in a couple weeks. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Microdosing for Healing podcast. Are you ready to take the next step? Please visit us at microdosingforhealing.com to access our free Microdosing 101 workshop. In it, you'll learn more about our diverse community, our supportive group programs, and discover if earth medicine practice might be right for you. See you in the next episode.